This is dispatches from r/tales from your server, the subreddit where the phrase, quote, "I do not mean to be difficult," end quote, is, as every server on Earth already knows, the opening line of The Difficulty. And the sentence, quote, "I have been a customer here for 20 years," end quote, is, in 98% of cases, spoken by a woman who has in fact been in the building approximately twice. Tonight, we are talking about restaurants. Specifically, the peculiar American belief that paying $32 for a plate of chicken carbonara grants you, for exactly the length of the meal, a brief and miraculous kind of aristocracy, a status so elevated that you may in its service refuse the food, dispute the bill, and at the most desperate moment, threaten to sue a woman named Jessica for 75 cents worth of ranch dressing.
75 cents.
A dollar amount that in any rational universe is below the transaction fee required to collect it. And yet, in the specific theater of the American chain restaurant, it has been the subject of at least one actual, documented, filed civil suit. A suit in which the plaintiff, as we will see, represented herself.
5 letters, 5 nights in the life of the American front of house. Each of these stories is, if you have ever worked a table in your life, already familiar in a way that will make your jaw clench. Each of these stories also contains a precise moment at which a server somewhere in this country briefly considered, in the walk-in cooler between 42 degrees and 38, the entire possibility of leaving the industry for good.
The walk-in. Cooler.
The spiritual refuge of the restaurant industry. The one place, in any given establishment, where a server can cry, pray, or quietly consider federal employment, all in the span of a single 90-second hide from table 12.
Letter the first, r/tales from your server. The title, quote, "Woman ordered the $68 beef Wellington, ate half, then told me she was a vegetarian and demanded it be free," end quote.
$68.
The beef Wellington is not a menu item. The beef Wellington is a commitment. It is the single most labor-intensive piece of protein an American chef will plate on any given Tuesday. And this woman has, in a single meal, consumed half of one, and then discovered at approximately the halfway mark that she has been a vegetarian the entire time.
Our author writes, quote, "I am a server at a fine dining restaurant in Charlotte. Our tasting menu is $110. Our a la carte entrees run from $40 to $70. Our beef Wellington, which is the most popular entree on the menu, is $68. It takes our kitchen approximately 45 minutes to prepare. It is served, sliced, with a red wine demi-glace and roasted root vegetables. It is objectively incredible." End quote.
Objectively incredible.
When a server uses the word, quote, objectively, end quote, about a menu item, it means that the item is not only good, it is so good that the server has, at some point in the last calendar year, gone home and cried about the fact that it exists, and she cannot afford it on her own shift meal.
Quote, "2 weeks ago, a party of 4 sat in my section. One woman, mid-50s, was the alpha of the table. She was wearing a white blazer. She took 40 minutes to order. She asked me 7 questions about the beef Wellington. She asked me if the beef was, quote, grass-fed, end quote. I said yes. She asked me if the pastry contained butter. I said yes. She asked me how the beef was cooked. I said medium rare. She ordered the beef Wellington," end quote.
7 questions.
The 7-question order is the single most reliable forecast in the restaurant industry. A guest who asks 7 questions and then orders the item anyway is, without fail, approximately 45 minutes away from sending the item back to the kitchen for a reason entirely unrelated to the answers she was just given.
Quote, "The beef Wellington arrived at the table. She ate, I timed this, 11 minutes of sustained consumption. She ate 3 of the 4 slices. She was chewing. She was happy. Her husband was happy. I came by to check in. I said, quote, how is everything? End quote. She said, quote, oh, it is so good. I am so glad I ordered this. End quote.
I am so glad I ordered this.
The single most load-bearing positive check-in in the history of the American dining experience. The kind of, quote, it is so good, end quote, that we now know, with the certainty of a court stenographer, was being said by a woman who was already, in her head, beginning to assemble a different story about the meal she was currently enjoying.
Quote, 4 minutes later, she waved me over. She was frowning. She said, quote, I need to speak with you privately. End quote. I knelt next to the table. She said, quote, I am a vegetarian. I just realized there is beef in this. I am very upset. This is not acceptable. I need the dish to be removed from my bill. End quote. And
Beef is in it.
A revelation delivered by a woman who had been actively asking about the grass-fed nature of the beef 42 minutes earlier, which suggests that her commitment to vegetarianism is at best situational and at worst entirely retroactive.
quote, I said, quote, ma'am, you ordered the beef Wellington. The name of the dish is the beef was grass-fed. I said it was. End quote. She said, quote, I thought Wellington was a type of pastry. I did not know it was a meat. End quote. And
A type of pastry.
At this moment, in the fine dining restaurant in Charlotte, our server is standing next to a woman in a white blazer who has just informed her that she believed the word Wellington to refer not to a historical British Prime Minister or a 200-year-old dish of encased beef, but to a kind of turnover, a kind of scone, a kind of vegetarian croissant.
quote, I got the manager whose name is Doug and who has been in the industry for 31 years, approached the table. Doug looked at the plate. The plate, I remind you, was 3/4 empty. Doug said, quote, ma'am, the plate is almost empty. End quote. She said, quote, I could not waste food. I was raised to clean my plate. End quote. End quote.
I was raised to clean my plate.
The strict Midwestern upbringing that, for 11 uninterrupted minutes, forced a committed vegetarian to consume 3/4 of a $68 beef Wellington against her will, out of a sense of duty to her own mother, who was, presumably, watching from 1,100 miles away, via satellite.
Quote, Doug, a man who has seen every variant of this scam, said, quote, ma'am, I am going to do you a favor. I am going to charge you for the Wellington. I am going to send out a complimentary dessert for the table. And I am going to ask, politely, that in the future you do not order menu items that you do not intend to eat. End quote. She said, quote, this is discrimination. End quote. Doug said, quote, ma'am, I am not sure on what grounds. End quote. End quote.
On what grounds?
The single most surgically precise response ever delivered by a general manager to a customer in the state of North Carolina. Doug has, in fewer than 10 words, invited the guest to name the protected class to which her dietary fraud belongs. And Doug knows, because Doug has been doing this for 30 years, that there is not one.
Quote, she left the restaurant. She did not tip. She left a 0 on the tip line. She also left on her napkin a note that read, quote, you should be ashamed, end quote. I took the note home. I framed it. I have it above my dresser. It is to this day the single best review I have ever received, end quote.
You should be ashamed.
A napkin, a felt tip pen, and the final parting shot of a woman who has, in the span of 53 minutes, eaten most of a cow and then accused the restaurant of immorality. Our author framed it. Our author is a hero. Our author deserves a plaque in the dining room, right next to the Wellington.
Letter the second. R/Tales from your server. The title, quote, Table of 14 at a $300 per head tasting menu, asked me to split the check 14 ways, and then tipped me $3 total. End quote.
$3 total.
A tip so small, so mathematically insulting, so performatively wretched, that it can only be the product of 14 adults coordinating, out loud, at a table, on the exact minimum amount that they could collectively inflict as an act of group shame.
Our author writes, quote, I am a server at a tasting menu restaurant in Chicago. We do a single 11-course prefix menu. The menu is $315 per person. Wine pairings are an additional $200. Service is not included. We do not take walk-ins. Reservations are made via a lottery system, 6 weeks in advance. End quote.
A lottery system.
The Chicago Tasting Menu Reservation Lottery is a more exclusive process than the admissions committee at Deep Springs College. It has a lower acceptance rate than the MacArthur Fellowship. And a table of 14, by some miracle of group coordination, had actually successfully booked one.
Quote, the group arrived. It was a birthday party for a woman named Tanya. Tanya had apparently been planning this dinner for 6 months. Tanya was wearing a silver dress. Tanya seemed lovely. Tanya's 14 guests, I will say this as kindly as I can, did not seem lovely. End quote.
Did not seem lovely.
A diplomatic euphemism from the front of house for, quote, the worst group of people I have seen in an $800 restaurant since the 2019 Oprah Book Club incident. End quote. Our server is being generous. The reader should not be fooled.
Quote, 3 guests asked me during the first course if the restaurant had, quote, any regular food, end quote. 1 guest asked if I could make her, quote, just like a grilled cheese, end quote. 1 guest, a man in a Chicago Bears jersey, asked me, halfway through the dish of raw scallop with sea urchin and finger lime, if we had ranch. I am not making this up. He asked for ranch at a place where the tasting menu has been reviewed in the New York Times, end quote.
He asked for ranch.
I want every single person listening to this to understand that the ranch is not a condiment. The ranch is a statement of intent. The man in the Chicago Bears jersey has, with his single-word request, entered a state of open and conscious warfare with the 3 Michelin stars affixed to the front door of this establishment. And he is winning.
Quote, the bill arrived. It was $7,342, not including tip. Because the group had, during dessert, requested 14 separate checks, I spent 28 minutes at the POS, calculating the individual shares. I brought out 14 check presenters. I set them down, one by one, around the table. The table went quiet. End quote.
The table went quiet.
The second quietest moment in the recorded history of American dining. The silence of 14 adults who, somewhere around the 7th course, began to suspect that the $315 per person tasting menu they had been eating was actually going to cost, at the end of the night, $315 per person.
Quote, I collected the check presenters, I ran the cards. Each check was approximately $524, including the wine pairing. Every single guest, without exception, left a tip of 0, except for 1. The birthday girl, Tanya, left a tip of $3. The total tip on a $7,342 table was $3. End quote.
A tip of 0.
0%. 0% on a table that took 3 hours to serve, required the preparation of 154 individual plates, and at which one grown man in an NFL jersey asked, in a 3 Michelin star restaurant, for the condiment he uses on his Domino's pizza.
Quote, I approached Tanya as they were leaving. I said quietly, quote, Tanya, I am sorry, I need to ask. Was there a problem with the service? End quote. Tanya looked at me. Tanya said, quote, oh, sweetie, no. The service was great. We just, we figured on a tasting menu the tip is included, end quote. I said, quote, Tanya, The menu does not say that, end quote. Tanya said, quote, I assumed, end quote, end quote.
I assumed.
The single most expensive assumption in the documented history of the city of Chicago. Tanya's assumption, spread across 14 covers, represents a financial loss to our author of approximately $1,400 in gratuity on a single Saturday night during a single 45th birthday.
Quote, I went to the kitchen. I sat on a stool next to the pass. I did not cry. I laughed. Chef Cameron asked me what happened. I told him. Chef Cameron walked to the door of the kitchen. Chef Cameron looked out into the dining room. Chef Cameron said, quote, was it the guy in the Bears jersey? End quote. I said yes. Chef Cameron said, quote, of course it was. End quote.
Of course, it was.
Chef Cameron is a weathered man. Chef Cameron has, in his career, seen this particular archetype 79 times. Chef Cameron does not need context. Chef Cameron just needs the jersey.
Letter the third, r/choosing beggars. The title, quote, Craigslist post. Looking for caterer to do 200-person wedding for $4 per head in exchange for exposure to my sister's blog. End quote.
$4 per head.
A catering budget so mathematically offensive it would not cover the cost of a single Costco rotisserie chicken per table. This is not a wedding catering inquiry. This is a threat to the structural integrity of the food service industry.
Our author writes, quote, I own a small catering company in Portland. I cater weddings, corporate events, and small private parties. My base rate for a wedding is approximately $75 per head, and that is with my margins shaved as tight as I can make them. I also run, for fun, a subscription to the Choosing Beggars subreddit, because it makes me feel better about my job. Last Tuesday, one of the posts on Choosing Beggars was, and I swear on my knife roll, about me, end quote.
About me.
The universal pain of the small business owner in the year of our Lord, 2024. You find out that you have been the subject of a viral Reddit post, not because someone said something nice about your biscuits, but because someone quoted your email rejecting their insane request to feed 200 people for the cost of a single Chipotle order.
Quote, the bride had emailed me in January. Her email said, quote, Hi, my name is Madison. I am getting married in August. The wedding is 200 guests at a venue I am renting in the Columbia River Gorge. My budget is $800 total for food. I know this is low, but my sister has a lifestyle blog with 411 followers, and she will post about the wedding, which means huge exposure for your business. Let me know. End quote.
411 followers.
A follower count so specific and so catastrophically small that it tells you everything you need to know about the household economy underlying this particular wedding. The sister has, by definition, not monetized the blog. The sister has, in fact, probably lost money on the blog. And the sister has offered that as the sole form of compensation.
Quote, I replied politely. I said, quote, Madison, thank you for reaching out. Unfortunately, my minimum per head rate for a wedding of this size is $75. $800 total would not cover the cost of my ingredients, let alone staff, rentals, or fuel. I wish you the best. End quote. I hit send. I thought that was the end of it. End quote.
I thought that was the end.
No professional in the service industry who has ever said the words, quote, I thought that was the end of it, end quote, has ever, in the entire recorded history of email, been right.
Quote, Madison replied within 40 minutes. Her reply was 407 words long. I will not read the entire reply. I will read the key excerpt. She wrote, quote, I think you are being greedy. My sister's blog is called, quote, Cottagecore Bride, end quote, and she posts twice a month. If she features your business, you will be booked for years. I am offering you a chance to grow. Real caterers understand the value of exposure. I am going to tell my sister not to tag you. End quote.
Cottagecore. Bride.
A blog so comprehensively aesthetic and so comprehensively unmonetized that the only currency it can offer a professional caterer is the removal of its own endorsement, which is, upon reflection, the single finest deal any caterer has ever received on the internet.
Quote, I did not respond. I did, however, take a screenshot. I did also post the screenshot on the Choosing Beggars subreddit, with my own name and business redacted. The post got 32,000 upvotes. 4 of the commenters were wedding vendors in the Portland area who had also been contacted by Madison. All 4 of us compared notes. Madison had offered each of us, and I want you to hold on for this, quote, exposure to my sister's blog, end quote, in every single email, end quote.
All 4 of us.
Madison has, in the course of planning her own wedding, weaponized her sister's 411 follower blog against every single catering professional in a 200-mile radius of Portland. This is not choosing beggary. This is strategic deployment.
Quote, the punchline is this. Madison's wedding, which did happen in August, was catered in the end by the bride's own mother. The food, I was told by a mutual friend who attended, consisted of Costco trays of cocktail weenies, a single veggie platter, and approximately 11 pounds of pretzel bites in chafing dishes at an outdoor venue in 94-degree heat. 3 guests got food poisoning. The sister, I am told, did not write a blog post about the wedding. End quote.
11 pounds of pretzel bites.
The cosmic justice of the wedding industry expressing itself in real time through 11 pounds of Costco brand pretzel bites begging in the sun at a venue in the Columbia River Gorge, while 3 of the groom's co-workers develop a fast and memorable relationship with a porta potty.
Letter the 4th, r/kitchen confidential. The title, quote, customer claimed a reservation he did not have, and then told the GM he knew Gordon Ramsay personally. End quote.
He knew Gordon personally.
I want every person listening to this to understand that when a customer in an American restaurant invokes the name Gordon Ramsay, they have at that moment ceased to be a customer. They have become a category of guest known internally as, quote, the screamer, end quote, and they will not leave without a show.
Our author writes, quote, I am a host at a moderately upscale Italian restaurant in Scottsdale. On a Friday night at 7 p.m., a man walked up to my stand. He was wearing sunglasses. Indoors. At night, I have been a host for 11 years. I have never once seen anything good follow the act of wearing sunglasses indoors at night. End quote.
Sunglasses, indoors, at night.
A sartorial tale so reliable it should be taught in hospitality schools as a mandatory warning sign. The man in the interior sunglasses will, within 3 minutes, request either a table he has not earned, a drink that is not on the menu, or an off-menu courtesy that does not, in any known universe, exist.
Quote, the man said, quote, reservation for Rosenthal, party of 6, 7:30, end quote. I checked the book. There was no Rosenthal. I checked every spelling. Rosenthal, Rosenthal, Rosen. There was nothing. I said, quote, sir, I do not see a reservation under that name. Could it be under a different name? End quote.
No. Rosenthal.
The moment in which our host, 11 years into her career, has already identified the nature of the fraud, the identity of the perpetrator, and the approximate length of the scene that is about to unfold. All before the man in the sunglasses has had time to respond.
Quote, he said, quote, it is under Rosenthal. I made it yesterday. I spoke to a man, a host. He said, quote, we look forward to having you, end quote. I said, quote, sir, I am the only host. I did not take a reservation under Rosenthal yesterday. I was working all day, end quote. He said, quote, Then check with your manager. End quote. End quote.
Check with your manager.
The universal opening move in the American escalation protocol. The phrase, quote, check with your manager, end quote, is the restaurant industry's equivalent of cracking the knuckles before a bar fight. Nothing civil has ever followed it.
Quote, I got my GM Marco. Marco is from New Jersey. Marco has been in restaurants since he was 14. Marco knows. Marco walked over. Marco said, quote, good evening, sir. My host tells me we do not have a reservation under your name, end quote. The man said, quote, that is unacceptable. I drove 40 minutes for this. I know Gordon Ramsay personally. He recommended your restaurant to me. I will be telling him about this experience. End quote. End quote.
Gordon recommended your restaurant.
A claim so specific, so verifiable, and so immediately falsifiable that it suggests the man making the claim has not at any point in the last 10 minutes considered the possibility that Gordon Ramsay, the most famous chef in the English-speaking world, is a man whose endorsement of a particular mid-tier Italian restaurant in Scottsdale, Arizona, would be a matter of public record.
Quote, Marco, without blinking, said, quote, oh, you know Gordon. Interesting. What is his wife's name? End quote. There was a long pause. The man said, quote, I do not think that is any of your business. End quote. Marco said, quote, it is Tana. It has been Tana for 28 years. They have 5 children. End quote. Marco then listed in order the names of all 5 of Gordon Ramsay's children, including the twins. End quote.
He lists all 5.
Marco from Jersey, a man who has been working in restaurants since the Clinton administration, has just executed the single most devastating public humiliation in the history of the American reservation system, using as his only weapon a working knowledge of Hell's Kitchen trivia and a complete absence of fear.
Quote, the man removed his sunglasses. The man said, quote, look, I am a fan of the show. I thought maybe if I said I knew him, you would find me a table. End quote. Marco said, quote, sir, I understand I am a fan of the show also. I am going to find you a table because it is 7 p.m. and I have an empty 2-top by the window. I am going to ask that you do not claim to know any more chefs tonight. End quote. The man said, quote, deal. End quote. End quote.
Deal.
The most rapid de-escalation in the history of the American restaurant confrontation. From fraudulent celebrity name drop to honest confession to seated dinner for 2, all in the span of approximately 90 seconds, thanks entirely to the knowledge base of one Jersey-born general manager.
Quote, he tipped 20%. He ordered the veal parmesan. Marco gave him a complimentary glass of Chianti. The man left a Google review that said, quote, best veal in Scottsdale. The manager is a legend, end quote. The review did not mention Gordon Ramsay. The review did not mention Rosenthal. The review did not need to. The review was a 5-star confession, end quote.
A 5-star confession.
In the entire corpus of Google restaurant reviews, this single confession by a chastened man in an Italian restaurant in Scottsdale stands alone as the only review ever written by a customer who has been publicly humiliated by the general manager and yet went home to give them 5 stars. Marco deserves a television show. Marco deserves, at minimum, a book deal.
Letter the 5th, and the kicker, r/tales from your server. The title, quote, a woman threatened to sue our restaurant because we charged her 75 cents for extra ranch dressing, end quote.
75 cents.
The single smallest dollar amount in the entire recorded history of American civil litigation. A sum so small that the envelope required to mail the court filing costs, when adjusted for the postage, approximately 80 times the original disputed amount.
Our author writes, quote, I am a server at a chain restaurant in Omaha. The name of the chain does not matter. You can guess. Our menu includes, as a starter, a basket of bone and chicken wings. The basket comes with 1 cup of ranch dressing, additional cups of ranch dressing per our menu, and I am quoting directly from the menu, cost 75 cents each. The menu price is listed. It is printed. It is not a surprise. End quote.
It is not a surprise.
A fact that, in the specific psychology of the chain restaurant guest who is about to threaten legal action, is not in any way connected to what is about to happen. The menu has said in print, for the entire 3-year tenure of this particular printing, that extra ranch costs 75 cents. The guest has looked at the menu. The guest does not care.
Quote, on a Saturday at 8:30 p.m., a woman in my section, mid-50s, wearing what I can only describe as full airport casual, ordered a basket of wings. I brought the wings. I brought the cup of ranch. 4 minutes later, she waved me over. She said, quote, I need another ranch, end quote. I said, quote, yes, ma'am, no problem. I just want to let you know that additional ranch is 75 cents, end quote.
Full airport. Casual.
The specific aesthetic of the woman who is about to file a civil action over a dairy-based dipping sauce, the outfit, the fanny pack, the airport, even though she has not been to an airport. Full airport casual is the uniform, and she is, at this moment, wearing it in uniform.
Quote, she said, quote, 75 cents for ranch. I have never been charged for ranch in my entire life, end quote. I said, quote, ma'am, it is on the menu, end quote. She said, quote, I do not care what is on the menu. I am not paying for ranch, end quote. I said, quote, that is fine. I will bring you water instead, end quote. She said, quote, I want the ranch, end quote. I said, quote, it will be 75 cents, end quote. She said, quote, this is illegal, end quote.
This is illegal.
The magic word of the American entitled diner. The word, quote, illegal, end quote, when deployed in a chain restaurant context, is not a claim about law. It is a claim about emotion. It is a claim that the guest feels, in the center of her chest, that something she does not like is happening to her, and that the feeling itself is the tort.
Quote, I said, quote, ma'am, I can get my manager, end quote. She said, quote, yes, get your manager. I am going to sue this restaurant, end quote. I went to get my manager. My manager is a woman named Jessica. Jessica has been in restaurants for 16 years. Jessica came to the table. Jessica said, quote, good evening, ma'am. I understand there is a problem with the ranch dressing, end quote, end quote.
A problem with the ranch.
A sentence that, when said out loud by a woman named Jessica in a chain restaurant in Omaha at 8:30 on a Saturday night, conveys, in a single phrase, 16 years of professional hospitality exhaustion. Compressed down into the smallest possible phonetic footprint and delivered with the warmth of fresh snow.
Quote, the woman said, quote, you are charging me for ranch dressing. This is illegal. I am going to sue this restaurant for every penny it has, end quote. Jessica said, quote, ma'am, the charge is on the menu. Here is the menu, end quote. Jessica slid the menu across the table and pointed. The woman did not look. The woman said, quote, I want to speak to the owner, end quote. Jessica said, quote, I am the owner's representative in this building tonight, end quote. The woman said, quote, I want the corporate number, end quote.
The corporate number.
The final sacred move of the unhinged American chain restaurant customer. The demand for the corporate number is the equivalent, in restaurant warfare, of unsealing the nuclear football. The call will be placed. The call will be ignored. But the demand itself must be spoken aloud, in front of witnesses.
Quote, Jessica gave her the corporate number. The woman pulled out her phone. The woman called corporate. At 8:40 p.m. on a Saturday, the woman said, into the voicemail, quote, "My name is Deborah Whitman. I am at your Omaha location. I am being charged 75 cents for extra ranch dressing. This is consumer fraud. I am filing in small claims court on Monday." End quote. She then hung up. She turned to Jessica. She said, quote, "You will be hearing from my attorney." End quote. Jessica said, quote, "I look forward to it, ma'am." End quote.
Deborah Whitman.
A woman has just identified herself by full legal name on a corporate voicemail as the person who is about to sue a chain restaurant in Omaha for 75 cents. This is now, by any legal standard, a signed confession of lunacy. Deborah Whitman has entered the record.
Quote, and then, reader, Deborah Whitman actually filed. She filed in the small claims court of Douglas County, Nebraska on a Monday morning. 2 days later, the complaint sought damages of 75 cents, plus, and I am reading from the actual filing, quote, emotional distress in the amount of $15,000. End quote. The filing fee alone was $78. Deborah Whitman paid $78 to attempt to recover 75 cents. End quote.
78 to get 75 cents.
Deborah Whitman, in a single weekend, has achieved the most mathematically catastrophic return on investment in the entire recorded history of Douglas County civil litigation. Her filing fee exceeds her damages by a factor of 104 to 1. The emotional distress claim is technically a work of fiction.
Quote, the case was, of course, dismissed. The judge, a man who has been on the bench for 21 years, wrote in his dismissal, quote, the defendant charged exactly what was printed on the menu. The plaintiff has failed to demonstrate any grounds for relief. The plaintiff is ordered to pay court costs. End quote. Deborah Whitman, in attempting to sue us for 75 cents, was ordered to pay a total of $142 in court costs. End quote.
142.
In the entire history of American tort law, Deborah Whitman has achieved the single most perfect demonstration of the mathematical principle that a customer's anger, when fully monetized, will always cost her more than the original offense. 75 cents, inflated by stupidity, compounded by ego, equals $142 in cash paid to the court clerk of Douglas County, Nebraska.
Quote, I framed the court ruling. I framed it next to the Wellington woman's napkin. The two frames hang above my dresser. They are together the single most valuable possession I own, which is, when I am being honest, a statement I should probably work through with my therapist. End quote.
Work through it with my therapist.
A sentence that every single server, bartender, line cook, and dishwasher in the entire United States has, at some point, said out loud to themselves. Usually, while walking out of a shift at 2:30 in the morning with a $10 tip in their pocket and an entire night of Deborah Whitman's energy in their bones.
5 letters, 5 tables, a beef Wellington, a 14 top-tasting menu, a Craigslist wedding, a fraudulent reservation, and the most expensive cup of ranch dressing in the history of Douglas County. Each of these stories was told by a person who earns, on average, less than $30 an hour. Each of these stories was inflicted by a person who, on average, believed that the world owed them something specific.
Owed them something specific.
In the entire taxonomy of the American restaurant guest, the most dangerous species is not the rude one or the loud one, or even the drunk one. It is the one who believes, with the full force of their being, that they are owed something they did not pay for. That belief is the only true allergen the kitchen cannot accommodate.
I want to say one thing carefully to every single person who has ever walked into a restaurant in their entire life, which is, by the way, almost every person who is going to listen to this. The server is not your friend. The server is not your enemy. The server is a working adult trying to get home by midnight to a partner, a dog, or an empty apartment with a bowl of cereal. And the single greatest kindness you can offer them is to read the menu, tip 20%, and not order the beef Wellington if you have, at any point in your life, considered yourself a vegetarian. This has been dispatches from r/tales from your server. I remain your correspondent. The restaurant industry is, when you strip it down, a massive national experiment in human kindness, run by tired adults for the benefit of strangers for an hourly wage that would make a French labor inspector fall to the floor. Tip your server, read the menu, do not ask for ranch at the 3 Michelin star restaurant. And if you, personally, are thinking about filing a lawsuit for 75 cents, please, for the love of God, just eat the ranch.
Just eat the ranch.
And tip the server for bringing it to you from a kitchen run by people who are, right now, somehow, still showing up.